in court. So to start with, let me introduce our first speaker, Sir Geoffrey Nice KC, who is a human rights barrister and a current chair at the Uyghur Tribunal. So Geoffrey, please.
Yay! Thank you. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Can it be right for our government to approve or to encourage a country known and shown to have committed crimes against humanity, torture, and above all, genocide against its own people, the Uyghurs of northwest China, to set up shop in this most significant building in the heart of our city?
No! No!
The government will, of course, say it does not know or accept that those crimes have been committed, especially when it comes to the question of genocide. In fact, it does know. It will have made its own assessments, but it chooses not to let us know. And why? Dealing with genocide, as you will all know, genocide is not a question of mass killing. Mass killing may be genocide, it may not. Genocide is that crime identified after the Second World War, where one part of our single humanity chooses to try to destroy another part of our single humanity simply because of what that other part is. Whether it's Armenian people in the First World War, Jewish people in the Second World War, Rwandan Tutsis in 1994, Bosnian Muslims in 1995, and so on. That crime, when it is established, is impossible to stop unless stopped from outside, and the Genocide Convention requires countries that recognize genocide to do something, and countries never want to do that. Now, it happened that a few years ago, many bodies, not just the Uyghur Tribunal, of which I was one of 9 members, who had no interest in China, but were just answering the question asked of us, but there were many other bodies at the same time making similar determinations about what had happened in the People's Republic of China concerning the Uyghurs. And many of those bodies made determinations far stronger against the People's Republic than our Uyghur Tribunal did. We found only one form of genocide to have been proved. Others, including such important figures as Baroness Kennedy, for example, found all 5 possible forms of genocide proved. But the government found ways of avoiding those established points of fact. Or alternatively, if you want to be fairer to the government, it declined to say, well, interesting, but we don't agree with you for these reasons. Governments have found ways of avoiding dealing with genocide. There are 2 ways they have. One is to say, never use the word genocide, which is what happened in Rwanda. Don't use the word genocide, and then we won't have to do anything. The other way is the present way that the last government and this used, which is to say, we need a judge to decide whether genocide is being committed. Do you know how sensible that is as an argument, ladies and gentlemen? It's like the following. You walk down a road, there's an open door. Behind the open door, there's a man beating his child over the head with a rolling pin so that the child will eventually die. What do you say? Oh, I think I better have a judge along to tell me whether I can do anything. No, you act. And that's what governments know is imposed on them as a duty. That's why they avoid confronting reality. So, let me finish in this way. In your exercise, of which I'm not an activist member, although I understand its purpose, bear in mind that there are many, many organisations that have made determinations about the People's Republic of China that you may find helpful as things to use in considering the overall position and use of this building, which, and I repeat the question, should our government be encouraging that use of this building by a country shown to have
Hello. Is everyone hearing better now? Yeah? Okay. So, thank you to Geoffrey. And next we will have Lord Bethell. Lord Bethell has previously served as Parliament Under Secretary for the Department of Health and Social Care. Lord Bethell, please.
And you want me to do this as well as the speaker? Yep, okay.
Jocelyn, thank you very much for the very, very kind introduction. My friends, I strongly support the ambitions of the Chinese people and their determination to take a serious and high-profile role in the affairs of the world. But this embassy is not a symbol of Chinese pride. It is, I'm afraid to say, a headquarters for surveillance and for intimidation and for the secret services of the CCP, who have a record, a proven record around the world of nefarious and illegal activities, not least here in this country, where time and again they have been responsible for the intimidation of Chinese and Hong Kong and Taiwanese people, of using their influence and their people on the ground to bring intimidation to the Uyghur people, to people of Tibet, and to those Chinese dissidents who have disagreed with the regime. My friends, there is no excuse, no reason to build a mega embassy to serve as a headquarters for that kind of activity. I am a Londoner. I've lived here all of my 57 years. I'm very proud to see Peter Gold here, Councillor Gold, who is a very old friend who I've known since I was a small child and is a leader and influential person in this community. He has made the very clear case, as have others, that this is a totally inappropriate location for an embassy. And standing here on this beautiful day surrounded by thousands of protesters, my goodness, you can see why, right? This is not the right place for an embassy. My friends, we have seen in Manchester what the CCP use their consular locations for. We have seen with the shadow police stations what their intentions are, which is to take the reach of the CCP from the home territory into foreign lands in order to intimidate the wider Chinese community. That is in breach of British customs, in breach of British law, and we should not stand for this embassy being the centre of those kinds of activities. My friends, I've seen this kind of mistake happen before. In Washington, DC, they let the Russians build a great big embassy at the top of the hill where they could beam their lasers and focus their radar and use their surveillance in order to peer into the windows of every other embassy in Washington, DC. My friends, it was a total disaster. let us please learn from that mistake. Let us please be pragmatic, and let's please nip this crazy idea in the bud. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lord Bethell. And now, can I please introduce Kevin Hollinrake MP, who is the Shadow Secretary for State for Levelling Up Housing and Community.
Whatever this government may say, the first duty of any government is not growth. It is the safety and the security of the residents of this country and the people who live in it.
Yes.
And both on a local and national basis, this government is failing miserably. Whether it is local people here, beautifully led by Sue Hughes and others here, who have understandable worries about their own safety, about terrorism, about disruption, or in terms of the national security interest. It is a disgrace. You see people like Ken McCullen, who's head of MI5, speaking only a couple of years ago with Chris Wray from the FBI, saying that China is their most potent threat. This is their most challenging nation to deal with. They're a hostile state, and yet this government seems willing to risk our national security to curry favour, to kowtow to the Chinese government. It's absolutely wrong. Let me be clear, no politician here, Iain, James, anyone else here has any problem at all with the Chinese people. This is not a fight against the Chinese people. This is a fight against the CCP and our own national interest. And not for the first time, the government's in a complete mess on this. We have met with people who don't want to be named, but have been involved in our security services, the people who are responsible for cyber security in this country, who are deeply worried about this development. Not just the fact we have the CCP influence here, but the scale of this. Thousands of people in that building there who are clearly going to be charged with the responsibility of identifying and securing sensitive government information. It is economic espionage, it is our tech and our research information. All those things are at risk. That's much better, thank you very much. And of course, when we wrote to the Prime Minister on this on the 25th of January to set out our concerns, we got a letter back only a couple of days ago from Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. So let's face it, almost every senior person in government, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, have all involved themselves in this. They're idiots, quite right. And they know not what they do. They were quoted in a letter back to us. The reason she said, Angela Rayner said she called in this application was twofold. One was because the Foreign Secretary asked her to, because she can involve herself, you can do that as Secretary of State when it involves a foreign government, clearly implying that this is something we want to do in China's interest. And the other reason, she said, is because of a letter from Innovate UK. Through a freedom of information request, we saw the fact Innovate UK have great concerns about this, quite rightly, on defence and national security grounds. Yet they use that as a reason why they call this application in. It is totally wrong. This application must be rejected. The British public, 77% in a poll I saw, of the British public are against this application, against this development. We are too. We'll do everything we possibly can to campaign against it. And even if it's granted permission, it's consent for the planning consent, then we'll still continue to campaign against it. And I know you will too. Thank you.
Hello. Is everyone here okay? Yeah? Good. So thank you very much, Kevin. And now I'd like to introduce Luke Taylor, MP, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for London. Luke, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Iain. Oh, here we go. I'm a funny colour because I've been at the Hindu Festival of Holi this morning, which was incredible in my constituency. In Sutton. We are so lucky in Sutton to have such an incredible community of Hong Kongers there, and it's brilliant to see many of you here today, and I am proud to be here on your behalf to speak at this protest. Human rights, freedom of speech and worship and artistic expression and the rule of law, these are not just words, and nor are they optimistic values. They are the cornerstone of a just international order. After the Second World War, nations and peoples spanning the circumference of our world came together to do something special and beautiful, and we laid that cornerstone at the very foundation of our systems. It's tempting to think that recent efforts to chip away at those foundations are a new thing, or that these steps show warning signs of a centre that cannot hold, the creaking sounds that come before a collapse. But that's not true. We've always had to fight for freedom. We've always had to stand up to tyranny and oppression. It's in the struggle that we renew our commitment to these values of freedom, and we preserve the foundations for another generation. My party, the Liberal Democrats, have always believed that Britain's role in this world is to embody a liberal, open, democratic and internationalist foreign policy. And it's those values that lead me to stand in front of you today. And I say proudly, I am an ally of the people of Hong Kong. Now, this isn't just because we share a Commonwealth history, and it's not just because many of you are British passport holders, but because we're all human beings, and we all deserve democracy. We all deserve liberty, and we all deserve security. This protest today is in the great tradition of that British pursuit of liberal values. And I'm so proud to see so many of you from Sutton and beyond standing here before us, no matter the risks and no matter the cost, because I know that many of you fear impact and repression upon your families and friends in Hong Kong by the Chinese and Hong Kong governments, and that's why many of you are hiding your faces today. That's how much you fear the actions of the CCP here and abroad on you and your families, and that's why this process is so important today. So seeing those faces, seeing those hidden faces, reminds me, and it should remind every member of Parliament, that we must never be afraid to tell foreign governments in our dealings with them that we will not stand idly by whilst liberty is under attack. We will call it out whenever we see it, and efforts to enforce their repression on our streets, to bring their transnational repression to our own communities, are a grave violation of our trust, of international security, and are not acceptable under any circumstances. My party firmly believes that we must take a strong stance against the CCP and champion the rights of the people that it seeks to silence. So I assure you today, the plans for the embassy's relocation here will be opposed by my party, and we will continue to hold the government to account to ensure that activities like the bounties on your brave activists are protested and stopped on behalf of all of you, because in each of us lives the calling of conscience, and we cannot shrink from it. We must let it guide us towards a just, liberal and peaceful international order. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today, and thank you for your protest.
Thank you, Luke. Now we'll introduce Bobby Dean, the Liberal Democrats MP for Carshalton and Wallington. Bobby, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to explain to you my reasons for being here today. On the face of it, I'm here because I have thousands of Hong Konger constituents and I'm here to be their voice. I'm also here today in my capacity of Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Hong Kong. But the real reason I'm here stretches all the way back to my childhood. When I was young, I was always fascinated by the world and the unfairness in it. Etched into my memory were images of desperate poverty in Africa and young girls in Afghanistan without rights. And it never sat well with me. I always asked myself how and why. How is it that on the same planet people could live so differently? And why is it that opportunity wasn't the same for everybody? And so before my career started last year in Parliament, my career was in international development, because I'd grown up with the impression that over time things got better, that people got more access to healthcare and education, they earned more rights, and that freedoms received ever greater, more protection. And I wanted to be a part of that. And so I also volunteered with human rights organisations across the world and worked with young political activists. And I did all that because I wanted to be part of that slow march towards progress. But in that work, an ugly truth was revealed to me. In 2012, I was in Istanbul with young Turks who were telling me about the backsliding happening under President Erdogan and his increasingly authoritarian rule. In 2014, I was in Ukraine, and young Ukrainians were telling me in Kyiv not to believe Vladimir Putin and to understand his true intentions for their country. In Morocco, in Jordan, in Tunisia and Egypt, I watched the Arab Spring and democracy rise up as quickly as it fell away. And in all those experiences, I learnt a couple of things. The first is that there is nothing inevitable about progress, and that things go backwards as well. And the second is that you have to listen to the people on the ground. They're the one who know their realities best, and you should heed their warnings very early. Now, it's 2025, and a lot of that might seem quite obvious to a lot of us. There's a lot of chaos and conflict in the world, and the stories I just told you in hindsight seem so straightforward. And yet, we're about to make the same mistake again. We're standing outside a gift, a giant gift the size of a super embassy to China, and yet we know what China is responsible for. We've seen them tear apart the joint declaration. We've seen them put bounties on the heads of citizens in this country who are saying that they want to live in peace and with freedom. And you can leave aside some of the other concerns about this site, the security concerns well founded by our intelligence agencies and by the US Congress, or the logistical challenges of this site. Apparently the police say that protests could go ahead here and last time was a one-off. Well, I think we've proven them wrong today upon that point. But more broadly, I want to talk about the status symbol that this would gift to China. The largest Chinese embassy in Europe, a great big welcome mat, inviting them in to dust off their feet and say that this is their home, despite the knowledge of all of what I've just said. And what is it all for? It's for the tiniest bit of leverage in a trade negotiation that is always going to be settled on the economic realities of those two countries. Why? Why are we offering them this small gift in exchange for risking our national security in exchange for giving up our values and principles that this country's been built on, in exchange for the international law that we worked so hard to set. Why are we doing that? I'm here today to say no to all of that. And I'm here to say yes to freedom. Because I might not have that same naive optimism I had as a child, but I still feel as motivated today as I did then to stand by those principles. I thank you for coming here today to stand alongside them too. Let's stand for freedom.
Thank you very much indeed, Bobby. And finally, please welcome Sir Iain Duncan-Smith, former Conservative Party leader and former Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
I am here because I am sanctioned by the Chinese government because we stood up for the Uyghur who are in genocide, and I believe in freedom. Many of you are here because you have fled this authoritarian regime that has stolen your rights, stolen your freedom of speech, and stolen your ability to ever have a protest in Hong Kong like this. Shame on you, the Chinese government. And up in the Mint, in the very building that they want as an embassy right now, they are photographing all of you to take the records back to their government and try and seek you out. Let's all wave to them now and tell them we believe in freedom. Give them a big wave. I do not understand why a British government elected by a free people in a democracy governed by the rule of law and freedom of speech, how can this government, as it watches as Chinese government puts illegal police stations in the United Kingdom, how can they believe that they can do a deal with a government that lies to them every single day? How can they do business with a government that puts a Confucius Institute into our universities to spy on all of you and to hound any Chinese student that ever says anything against the Chinese government? How can they believe in that? And how can they think that a Chinese government will stand by its agreements when this is the same government that has stolen the freedom of the Chinese people in Hong Kong, who had a treaty, an international treaty, and they simply tore it up, moved in and arrested so many of you and your families? Shame on the government if they believe that. You are here because you are brave. You know that there are in the crowd, there are some people who are busy trying to figure out who is here and take their names. Out there in the community, we now know that the Chinese government is trying to get British people who are neighbours of any of you who have bounties on your head to spy on you and take you to the embassy so they can arrest you. That is exactly what they are about. They do not believe in freedom. They do not believe in justice. They do not believe in free speech or the ability to congregate. And yet the British government, that is founded on all of those, runs to China in a pose that's kowtow to them and begs them to take over this country with their money. That must never, ever happen. This embassy that they want, they must never have. It is a historical site, first of all. It is the foundation of our currency. No other country would give that away. It has a historical element in it as well, of an old church. And they will never be able to get access to that ever again to see it. Their China has said no. And most of all, there are British citizens, over 200 of them, living on this site. The British government has abandoned them. Shame on you for forgetting about your own people. Everywhere that China goes, when they found a mega embassy, what do we know? That attacks on Chinese dissidents in that country increase dramatically as they put more and more of their spies into this sort of place and hunt you down. I am a British politician. We are of all different parties. We believe together that we work together to protect the freedom of all of those who live in this country, whatever their backgrounds are. I swear to you here today, we will not give up. We will fight this idea of a super embassy here, and we will fight for your freedoms.
Thank you, Sir Iain, and thank you very much to all of our speakers. And before I hand things over to our co-organizer, Thank you.